Hi, I'm Terry Markham with Uprising, and we are back again today to continue our social media campaign called It's All Connected. As you know, we've been posting a series of interviews, each one relating around a different topic. And today, our topic is pornography. And we have John Pulley here with us. He is associated with Fierce Freedom and Man Alive Expedition, and it seems like a whole bunch of other things. So I'll let you tell us about that. So just introduce yourself and uh, why don't we start with giving us a little bit of an overview about the harmful impact that pornography has had in your life?
Of course. I work with Fierce Freedom, which is an anti-human trafficking organization based out of Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And at the same time, I've got a group of men that we have started a Man Alive Expedition is a 4-day excursion essentially into, it's based on Wild at Heart by John Eldridge, which is a book that talks about uh, the masculine characteristics that men struggle with, because a lot of times in society you're told you need to be this way but you feel this way, and so we kind of work through some of that tension to figure out how to live in an authentic and vulnerable way. And so those two organizations are my primary focus, and I've enjoyed doing so. The reason that I get to work in this field a little bit is that of human trafficking is that, sorry, anti-human trafficking. I always still say human trafficking. People go
Me
anti.
too.
I'm like, I know.
And this month too, I've made the mistake a couple times of being like, it's human trafficking month. Please don't traffic people in January.
Oh, that's hilarious. But yeah, I think the big part of why I'm here is that many years ago, I say many years ago, I started a journey that um, began with pornography. That basically over a 10-year period, I moved through just about every kind of porn and sex addiction behaviors that you could think. And fortunately for me, part of the reason we do Man Alive is that group that we founded that with. Um, they're a group that has really helped me in my recovery and in my ability to be authentic and transparent about this, and even be able to talk about this. So that's kind of how I got in the anti-trafficking world, was by um, looking at a lot of pornography. It's not a great story, but it's there, you know.
So after that, I mean, when did pornography start to become problematic in your life?
And we called one of those 800 numbers. And again, porn wasn't a big issue for me. I'd seen it when I was younger, 10 years ago, but it wasn't a big deal. But one of those phone calls, when I called one of them, it struck me. I found myself turned on by the phone
Mhm.
call. And I was thinking, oh, well, that's kind of hot, right? Because I'd never really explored pornography and done that. So when I got reintroduced to it later, um, it was something that was just different. And so that's kind of how I got that. Became about once every month and a half, I'd stop by a payphone on the way home and listen, or then it became every month, then it became every couple of weeks. I did travel for work, and some of that escalated into, looking at things when I was traveling and things of that nature. So pornography for me started off small, but it really grew over time because it really became my go-to. I was struggling with my own insecurities. I was struggling in my marriage, and I used that as an excuse to turn to pornography, and looked at a lot of pornography over a 10-year period. It really escalated. You can see an
Mhm.
escalation of it over that period.
Do you think at the time that you realized just how problematic it was becoming in your life?
Oh, no, not at all. I think that I was like anyone in an addiction. I I justified it in my own mind. I com It's really easy to, when we're going to try to justify something, we compare ourselves to the worst people. Well, I'm
Mhm.
not like that guy that looks at porn every day for hours a day and blah blah blah. Um, and then it's it's kind of like you become numb to it at a certain point, because at first, making the phone calls, I felt embarrassed by that. And this is not what I do. I had gotten married too in the first part of this addiction, but I used it as an excuse to, I'm not cheating on my wife, because things with us were a little bit of a struggle, as some new marriages have. And I used that as an excuse. And so no, I justified it in every way in my own mind, and I felt bad about it for a while. But then after a time, it just becomes something normal that you do. And so even when it started ramping up, I it had become so normalized in my everyday behaviors that I didn't see it as an issue. I saw it as an outlet for me that was helping me deal with and cope with life. So I justified it and just got used to it. So no, I didn't see it at the time as an issue.
You led right into my next question, actually. Um, it really is extremely accessible to get access to pornography now. It's very normalized. Sometimes I've even heard it go so far as to be labeled as like it's healthy for you to look at porn or for couples to look at porn. Can you sort of give us your thoughts on that?
So I think the majority, I believe wholeheartedly, the majority of people are looking to feel love and intimacy. We want someone to know us, and we want to be known and accepted for who we are. I think that's what most of us want. Pornography gives the illusion of intimacy. It gives the illusion of connection. I think a lot because of um, when you watch pornography, you're not seeing people. I mean, you're seeing people that play out whatever fantasies you have because you can get access to anything. So to me, I think that what pornography does is on the flip side of it is it creates an incredibly unrealistic view and expectation that you then will take and put onto your relationship.
Yeah, and talking about unrealistic expectations, we know that there's an increasing number of young people, children, teenagers who are being introduced to porn, and a lot of times that's their first introduction to sex and sexual relationships or relationships at all. So they're going right into their first relationships already with all of this stuff built up in their head. It seems incredibly harmful to me.
Well, yes, because then the cycle happens, right? Because even at the young age, when they start viewing porn, which they say the average age is somewhere around 7 or 8 that people view porn for the first time, which is dumbfounding to me. But of course, I grew up in a different decade. But um, it creates this cycle. So they start doing these things that they see and trying to make that work in an adult way. It comes up empty, and then they feel maybe not shame, but they feel like, oh, well, that didn't work. I need to do it again. Let me go back and watch porn to learn what I did wrong. And they go back and they keep trying to do this
Mm.
thing that's never going to fulfill them. And so it becomes this cycle that then leads into, young adulthood, and it just continues to perpetuate.
I can see that. Okay, let's move on a little bit. Now, your story is really interesting because uh, your addiction to pornography started to actually evolve to the point where you began to purchase sex. Can you tell us about that?
I did. The phrase I like to use all the time is porn was never enough. It was
Mhm.
never enough. And it's got a component to it that I mean, we could dive into the physiology of the brain and neural pathways and dopamine, all of that. We could dive into that, but the reality of it is when you first start looking at porn, like when I was a kid, you had Playboy, which was a naked woman. That was enough. And then you find out there's Penthouse, which is a man and a woman. Oh, well, let me look at that, right? And you're rewiring the brain that you need more and more to get the same high that you had from looking at the first thing. So for me, there wasn't much porn that I hadn't looked at. And I was struggling in my marriage because I didn't know how to be a man. I didn't know how to walk into a relationship confidently and lead a wife through intimacy because I didn't have any clue how to do it because I was filling my brain full of all of the porn. Um, so for me, I remember I used to work, and when I would work, I would travel usually a couple of weeks out of the month, and I would get a massage because I would drive 8 hours one direction, and I'd go get massages just because help your back and everything feel good. And I'd been watching a lot of porn at this point, and I remember the first time I went to a massage parlor and we got done, and the masseuse looked at me and she goes, "Well, are you ready for your happy ending?" Now, if she'd have asked me that 5 years earlier, I would have said, no, thank you. I appreciate that. It's very sweet, but that's not what I do. I really would have. But I had watched all of this pornography and this fantasy. And so I was like, huh, it's not really cheating. Again, I kept always justifying. It's not really cheating. We're not having sex. She's just touching, So I played that game. But once I found out I could do that, then when I traveled next, I looked for it. Um,
Mm.
I it it was there were enough fantasies in my head that were not getting played out in real life that I wanted to experience. And once I found out you could pay somebody to do that, which again, I wasn't stupid. I knew you could pay somebody to do that, but this was just another subtle way that I could start to justify in my own mind that this is okay. And so then I started pursuing that, and it expanded. Again, I was not only a pornography addict, I was a sex addict. It expanded into, going to strip clubs. It expanded into, paying for, prostituted women. It expanded from there because I was doing no real work in my life on my own heart and my own attitudes and my own relationship. I wasn't doing anything to become solid at who I am as a man and as a person and really believe in who I am. I was just going to that because it made me feel better for a little while. So that's kind of how mine. Again, all of this stuff, it's seemingly random, but I would 5 years earlier, if that masseuse had asked me that, I would not have said that to her. I would have said something very different.
Well, tell us a little bit about the demand report
Oh,
that you
yeah.
reference.
So Demand Abolition is a group that fights they're in Washington D.C. and they're an anti-trafficking group, and they work on the legislation side of things. They really want to help change laws. They did a very fascinating report that came out, I believe it was 2018, that they interviewed 8,200 men and they asked them about their buying habits. It was really interesting. They asked them, and they categorized them into different categories. They had never paid for sex. They had paid for sex once. Frequent buyer, meaning you purchase sex more than one time a year. And then they had the high frequency buyers that were purchasing multiple times a month. Interesting statistics come out of that. But the thing that I was going to say about the connection and the normalization is that they went through and they ranked all of the factors on how much, if you had bought, what led you to buying again. What were the factors that did that? And what I found interesting about this whole thing was the number one factor that would cause you to buy sex again was normalization beliefs. This is a victimless crime. I'm exchanging money for sex. No one's hurt in this. This shouldn't be illegal. Normalization was the number one factor by far that they said this is what will drive men who have purchased to purchase again. And what I thought was really fascinating about it was the number four factor that would cause men to buy again. And they weighted them. So it was like 5 times less important was pornography. That they said pornography would 5 times less. They would go, oh well, I can buy again because I look at porn. This is the thing that I found interesting from looking at that survey is that if you had asked me the survey questions 20 years ago, if you asked me the survey questions, I would have answered them squarely in the never bought category. I would have had zero normalization beliefs. I didn't believe it was a victimless crime. I didn't believe boys will be boys. That's what it is. This is normal. But in looking back, something triggered when I started paying for sex that something changed in what I used to believe that was this is not normal to this is absolutely normal. No one's hurt. I believe these normalization beliefs they're talking about that push buying. I think there's the primary factor that changed my beliefs from there are victims in this to there are no victims is pornography. There's nothing else in my life that I can point to that would shift my thinking to go, nope, this is not a problem when I always thought it was a problem. So, in talking about normalization and how porn impacts that, the more we watch porn, the more those kind of things become what we think is normal because what we look at and focus on determines what we see. So, I think that just that connection between purchasing of sex and pornography is very important to understand.
Yeah, that's a really good point to make because I know I'm no expert, but in some of the studies that I've heard about and read about, um, they've basically come out and said that most of the buyers of sex, they're not going to be deterred by someone who looks like they're in distress, who's crying, who looks underage. They sort of make justifications in their head like this is normal. They want to be here. Um, and from the studies I've read, the only two things that seem to make a difference and make that buyer question if they're going to pursue that again after they've been caught is if they have been caught, if they've been arrested, or if they've been publicly shamed in some manner. So
Hmm.
that's interesting that you attribute pornography to kind of flipping that switch because that's important to understand. Um, Now you are becoming this voice in the anti-human trafficking movement. So obviously, your stories changed a lot from where we were talking about. But before we get into a little bit of what you're doing now, um, it's made me think of the fact that now you understand a lot about the trafficking movement. You're on the other side of things.
Right.
So clearly you're well versed in all these red flags. Looking back on your experience, do you feel like you can pick out some of the red flags that you know are indicative of trafficking now? Like, do you think you possibly encountered victims when you were buying sex?
There's no question. There's no question. I made the connection between, for instance, if I went to a massage parlor in that was an Asian massage parlor in Dallas. I was from Dallas. If I went to an Asian massage parlor, when you excuse me, remember I said what you look at and focus on determines what you see.
Hmm.
When I'm doing my porn fantasy, when I'm watching pornography and there are women that work at a massage parlor and they want to be there and they're doing that, that's what I walk in the door with. What I didn't recognize when I walked in the door of a massage parlor, well, I did recognize it. There was a door, like in the back, there's a door when you walk in, and it is, you have to be buzzed in to walk into the back. Now, as someone that knew and had my fantasy and my vision on, I thought that is really smart for all of us that are paying for this. That door is shut so that it keeps the police from being able to get back there. We've got time to get ready and get out. What absolutely horrified me when I figured it out is that door was not there for me. It was there for the girls behind the door. They didn't speak
Hmm.
English. They didn't know what it never dawned on me that those women might be held there and they might live there. I saw bags there. I mean, again, you don't see the very bag, but occasionally if you go to them enough times, you see things. And I'm like, oh, that's weird. They got a suitcase in here. I guarantee you those women were being trafficked. I guarantee you. And I think that when you start talking about people in, in strip clubs, people that are dancing, you think, they come out, they talk to you. They're not hidden behind some door. They talk to you. They're engaging. They'll laugh and make you laugh. And, you know, you don't realize that the very definition of slavery is someone's doing something against their will and being forced to do it. And there are women in there that are being forced to go make X number of dollars tonight, or I'm going to kill your child, or I'm not going to give you drugs, or whatever the vulnerability that's been preyed upon. So,
Many more questions I want to ask you, but I really want to get down to some that I have here. Ultimately, your story ended up with you getting arrested, and that's sort of what helped um, initiate what led you to break this cycle. So, can you tell us a little bit about what breaking this addiction cycle looked like? You can tell us a little bit about the arrest, but I'm really interested to hear in some of the work that you really had to put in following the arrest and that you maybe even continue to have to put in to break
mhm.
that cycle and stay on top of it.
Oh, absolutely. The very short version for those watching is I had over that 10-year period, once I started having, sex outside of my marriage and paying for it, I had worked my way down, and I did it the same way, age wise. It was like they were in their 30s, they were their 20s, mid 20s, young 20s, 19. I had worked my way down, and my pornography had done the same thing. I was looking for more things. So the first time, I'm grateful that the first time that I went into a chat room to try to meet a teenager, because it was a teen chat room, I showed up to meet this person that said they were 15, and I was surrounded by police cars and arrested because it was a police sting. So to me, I'm very grateful. I wouldn't be here today. There's no telling where I would be. I might be in jail. I did get convicted. Clearly, it was a chat conversation online. And what happened that really, there were two factors that really impacted me in learning how to come out of this. The first was the way that the state of Texas does things is if you're a registered sex offender, you have to attend weekly group therapy classes that has a treatment provider. I say therapy. Here, I'll give you an example. The first day I walked in, there were probably 10 people in this group, this sex offender group, all on probation or community supervision of some sort. The treatment provider said, "Welcome, John. Let me explain to you the difference between therapy and treatment." She said, "Therapy is designed to make you feel better about yourself. Treatment is designed to make you feel uncomfortable. So welcome to treatment." And I'm like, I am going to hate this lady, but I love Sandy Potter. Sandy Potter is a saint. She is amazing. But one of the things that they did in this group that was really helpful, the problem with people that are addicted to porn or sex, the biggest issue is the secrecy. It is the biggest. Secret keeping is the most challenging to overcome. You back out of that a little bit and you learn why that's true. But we learned things like thinking errors. Let's go through the thinking errors. Redirecting, lying by omission. I mean, these are all things that justification, these are all things that everybody suffers with. And when you are keeping secrets, you do lie, you do manipulate, you do redirect. Let's move the conversation that doesn't put me where I'm going to be at risk of being found out. So I think learning over, and I went to that group for 9 years, and it took 2 years of being in that group to really admit that I needed to be there. So it took a lot of work and a lot of patience, but learning how to not keep secrets, learning that even while on probation, you learn that if you screw up and do something, it's better that you come out and you talk about it and you say, "I did this thing," than it is to hide it and pretend like it didn't happen. And that's just true of people. Um, Pornography, drugs, alcohol, their sex, they're all food. Doesn't matter. The secrets and the not being authentic and vulnerable is the hardest part, and that's why the reason that people stay in these addiction cycles and the things that they do that lead them in back into the same thing, the reason I did it is because I didn't really believe that I was okay as a person. Because I'll say this about getting help: there are places out there. There's Sex Addicts Anonymous. There are people that you can go to have conversation, but you got to have the conversation with somebody. If you
Mhm.
leave it in your own head, it will not leave. It will not. So you've got to find help. You've got to find out about secrecy. I found a group of men, the Man Alive that we talked about. What I've learned is that we decided after going to this event 11 years ago, we sat around and one night I'm like, well, all right, if we're going to do this, let's give it a shot. For the first time in my life, I told my whole unadulterated story to a group of 7 other guys. I mean, I told them, this is it. I went after a 15-year-old. I'm on probation. These are the things I did. I looked at porn. I cheated on my wife. Inside of all of that, the next man shared his story, and the next man shared his story. And we decided we were going to meet once a week and do life together and be honest and authentic. And as of October of last year, we've been doing that for 11 years. And so what I have found is a group of people, and again, it's not going to be a big group of people for most people. If it's one person, it's going to be a lot. You need people you can be authentic and vulnerable with. You need people that you can say, "I looked at porn this week," and they need to be able to know how to handle that. Because it's still a challenge today. These are things that are say. People go, "You got arrested, you did this, it almost ruins your life," and yet you know what it is. I do.
Mhm.
It's an addiction that I haven't kicked yet. But if I hide it and pretend like it's not real, it will kill me and it will put me right back where I was.
So let's talk about the things you're doing now. You have started to become public speaker and voice for the anti-trafficking movement. Tell us a little bit about what drives you now in pursuing this.
There's multiple things that drive me. The first is I think that there are tens of thousands of men and women out there doing what I did who would do something different if they knew. They would make a different choice if they knew that they were contributing to slavery. I believe that. And I believe also that I believe fundamentally people are created to be free. We're created to not walk around hiding and pretending and acting like, well, I didn't do that and I don't do that. And look at those people. I believe we're supposed to be free, and people who are stuck in an addiction and people who are stuck in pornography are not free. They're not free to love somebody because they're so focused on fantasizing about somebody else. There's a lot in there. There's there's a I mean I'm working right now on I'm developing out a course that I'm going to launch in the next 2 months, but I'm doing a course. I mean, I tried everything in the world. I tried accountability groups. I tried the software that reports. I tried all that stuff, and I just struggled with things. And it wasn't until I figured out how to learn my own personal identity and my own worth and the value of friendships that I was able to even do the work to get me to a place where I can talk openly about this. So I'm driven to help men and women that are trapped in this to get out. I'm driven to There's a part of me that this does help in some ways. It helps me to make up for some things. Yeah, there's no level of things I can do to make up for the choices I've made, but there's a part of me that goes, if I can keep one person from being victimized because I talk and I tell my story, if I can keep one child from having somebody go after a child because they go get help, I'll tell my story over and over and over. And what really drives me is I want people to be free, and that includes the people that are addicted to porn, the people who are buyers, and the people who are also victims and survivors, because they deserve it.
Well, and sort of building on that, last question here. Is there anything that you've learned just over this whole course of like the last X number of years of your life that translates into potential red flags for someone who's maybe themselves feel like maybe they're starting to go down this road of addiction that they could recognize, or even someone from the outside in recognizing in a loved one that they might be heading in this direction?
I think there are several things that I think are important to notice. When you get into any addiction, I mean, at least for pornography, when you get into addiction, you start to change your behaviors. I mean, there are behavior changes. There are times that you're spending more time alone together, right? It doesn't matter if it's drugs, alcohol, whatever. You need to hide that for a while because you don't want people to know. I think if you feel like somebody is being secretive, or if you are in that position where you are doing something that you couldn't sit around the dinner table and talk about with your kids sitting there, if you're doing something you couldn't do that, you're already pushing past barriers that you never thought you would. You're pushing past barriers that are dangerous. I think that when it comes to pornography, there's going to be some, in a marriage or a relationship, there are going to be some sexual issues that are going to start to appear, be it um, uh, inability to have sex, lack of erections, things of that nature, because you've masturbated all day long. You can't have sex without fantasizing about someone else. You have to have porn or something else, some outside factor besides you and the person you're with to be stimulated. It's going to start to show itself in that way too. There may be some new unrealistic demands placed upon the sex life, either by yourself or by your partner. I think that's across the board on that. But I think those are some of the things that in relationships you can start to notice it.
Well, thank you, John. Thank you so much for sharing and opening up. Um, I'm sure that it's something that continues to, can never be easy, I would say. Um,
No, no, ma'am.
Give us a shameless plug now. Where do we find you on all the social medias, and how do we follow what's happening in your world?
Oh yeah, well I appreciate that. Yeah, you can as far as social media goes, I'm on Facebook and Instagram, even though I've never really posted on Instagram. I just have one. I'm old. I do Facebook. Um, you can look me up on there. It's under, I think it's under John Pulley author. I'm in the middle of writing a book. I'm in the middle of putting together a course right now. I'm probably in the next month. I'm working on it right now. I'm going to be launching johnpulley.com. Got a website I've been working on, and I'm also working on a course. If you want to stay in touch with me or learn more about me right now, in the next week, I'll have up a subscription page on my website. But you can send me an email. My email is me at johnpulley.com. We also I also work, you can go to manaliveexpedition.com. That's our men's groups that meet. We meet a couple times a year typically. We have events that are in multiple states, so different places we meet. And then also fiercefreedom.org is the anti-trafficking organization that I work with and teach on demand as well. So yeah, all of those things, very exciting. And again, I'll have a calendar and all that on my uh, website whenever I get that up. I anticipate that's going to be done within the next month. That's my goal, is to have that done. So,
Awesome. Well, it sounds like you won't be hard to find.
nope, I'm out there.
All right, John. Well, thank you so much for your time today. We
Thank you.
appreciate you.
Oh, thank you so much for letting me be here.